I have commenced with button pushing. Yay. That was the opening song.
Welcome.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's podcast once again, which will be brought to you this week by racist grammar and also food-inspired ancestry searches.
Okay. This week's podcast is also brought to you by Skelegro and the 2020 census.
I am your host, Madison.
I'm your other host, Jesse James. After we talked about the first Harry Potter game last week on PS1, last week or the week before, they were pushed together, so it might have been the podcast before. I have now watched the first two Harry Potter movies again because my roommate and I have the HBO subscription action here. I really like those movies aesthetically, and I like watching them in context of the creator of that idea being a real turd and sort of reading it. The fact that the bad guys in that story are like made to be so evil that they have to be worse than the person who wrote it is more evident now that there's context for it, because they were always past cartoonish, and now it's like kind of sensible, because the main characters are like pretty shades of gray, so you would assume that it would all be shades of gray, but it's just moved over instead of being like polar opposites for that story. It's still good to watch though. I'm enjoying it, and I've only seen and like recollected half of those movies, so once I get to movie 5, I think it's completely different territory for me. Haunga.
I'm so jealous of that bite. That looked real good. This must be the week for like going back and revisiting old franchises like that, because I, for the first time, watched the finale of the Twilight movie.
That werewolf's gonna fuck that baby.
How did this go on and like I didn't hear about it? What? So I skipped a lot of movies in between. I think I've only seen the first one. I did not care to see any of the other ones, and then I watched Breaking Dawn Part 2, I think it is. Something like that.
Is that the last one?
I think it is. Although I think there is a new book or movie in the works that's like Rising Moon Shadow. I don't know. I'll probably be reading it because I'm a little bit invested. Now I got to see what happens to this really interesting relationship that I guess we're just going to let happen.
Also,
I guess it's fine.
If it's Moon Shadow, granted that's a very general term, but that's also the name of a very good, I think it's James Morrow comic.
I'll look it up because I know it's not Moon Shadow. I was just putting together vampire-sounding words.
The spam in this musubi is so damn thick.
That does look like some very thick musubi, and I'm very jealous. Stephanie Meyer's I can't type. New book. But yeah, I watched that for the first time, and that was real good. Interesting. I was surprised to see a lot of like actors in it that I was just like, you're a good actor. Like, really, you are a good actor. So I'm surprised to see you in this. Like, Rami Remy Malek. I'm
Yeah.
probably not saying his name right. He wasn't in there too much, but a little bit. And Dakota Fanning was in there too.
I
For
remember
like,
actually Dakota Fanning was one of the better editions of that.
yeah, I liked her character. Oh,
There
Midnight
are a few
Sun.
people in that. You could even make a decent uh, like case for Kristen Stewart being pretty decent in other stuff. She just is that
Mhm.
character has nothing. Like it's a
Yeah,
character that's only there to like swoon and occasionally get like performatively upset and that's it.
I think, yeah, my favorite quote, yeah, they really, Kristen Stewart is a good actress, I think. She doesn't have a lot to work with that role. I think my favorite quote from the movie that I remember was like the moment she finds out that Jacob has imprinted on her like 2 day old baby.
Uh-huh.
She goes, she goes, you think you can lay some wolfy, no, moronic wolfy claim on her? And I just really like the phrase moronic wolfy claim. I think it's good. So that
The
was some
whole
outstanding acting in that scene.
the whole story is hornier than necessary, uh, but
Yeah.
in all the wrong ways. The werewolf man imprinting on a baby is still the like every popular movie series has at least one or two things that are like way over the line in terms of like so people are just going to be okay with this. And uh the fact that Twilight, I think Twilight ended or was like near ending and Avatar came out around the same time, that was a point in time where it was just like you've got a movie that ends with a fully grown man werewolf imprinting on a baby, and imprinting means I'm a fuck it. That's what that story says it means. And then um,
Yeah.
for Avatar, you just have a movie that is partially about like colonialism, but like half also about like mind raping animals for the whole movie. Like the whole quest system, if that movie were like a video game, would be okay. Now you, to prove yourself, have to go find a very dangerous animal, take your sexual organ and ram it in theirs, and then you mind control it, and it's yours forever. It's just like the grossest thing, but people just don't talk about that part at all.
Nope. Those
Yeah.
parts are not important. Um yeah, I remember like I knew peripherally that there was a weird relationship in the Twilight series, and
Yeah.
I knew it was her daughter and Jacob, but I the whole time watching that play out, I was like in all the scenes where they're together and she's
They
like
couldn't
a child.
possibly.
I was just like, how are you gonna do this without it being horrible? And you can't is the answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just it's very cringy to watch those scenes and be like, wow, they don't even really interact with each other because there's no way to even
Mm-hmm.
think about it without it being gross. Anyway, that's that. I guess we'll get the solution or the ending to that story sometime this year.
Did you find the title?
Yeah, I did. It's called Midnight Sun,
Okay. Hmm.
and uh it's going to be coming out. Oh shit, it's out.
It's a.
Okay.
Is it a book?
Yeah.
Okay. I was
And
gonna say
the cover is a close up of a pomegranate, so you know there's
I
no
don't
sex
like
in this
that.
book.
That's got a lot of implications that I don't love for where that story left off.
Yeah. I really The whole thing is very hypersexual, which I knew, but I was kind of surprised. I thought it was really funny that um they make a point to talk about how like once you turn into a vampire, you're just like supremely horny, and then you like don't stop fucking for like 10 years
Well,
because you never get tired.
don't they literally have a scene that is like time passes and we're fucking the whole time in that last movie?
Yeah.
You would be uncomfortable. Also, keep in mind, like, they're dead, right? So,
Kind of, yeah.
like, I don't know what their fantasy world says that their bodies do, but there's a lot of aspects of sex that require people to be alive in order for it to work, I guess.
I think the deal is that they're not necessarily dead, but their bodies just don't age, I guess, or like
Okay.
time doesn't affect it. So I don't know
So
how
the
those
science isn't
functions
in, is
work.
what you're saying.
No, the science does not check out on this one. Like
Uh,
there's scenes where they tell her that when she's interacting with people, she has to imitate like breathing and stuff
right.
because she doesn't.
So
But
I would say as a living person, like the 2 hour mark in the range of sex is about where it's like this has to stop at least for a while.
yeah.
The idea of just pushing through for days or whatever is maybe one of the worst things I can think of. It's like the what if you had to eat the whole chocolate cake from Matilda, but what if like the cake had already starting to get stale like when you started, so by the time you got to the end of it, it was just like crusty cake
Ooh,
rinds. Like, you don't
yeah.
want that. It doesn't matter if it's good. It isn't gonna be.
It's not. Yeah. That doesn't. I don't know how that sounds good to anybody, but apparently that's a vampire thing. I also was surprised by the violence, actually.
Yeah.
Like the beheading that seems to be. I maybe in the book this is explored more, but that seems to be like the way that you kill a vampire is just they tear each other's heads off
Yeah.
constantly and
Uh,
burn each other, I guess.
it's an odd like mix of kind of correct like old vampire story stuff and then just sort of weird, horny fan fiction. But it makes sense because the horny fan fiction of Twilight being 50 Shades of Grey
Mm.
is more I don't know, it explores a little more emotional ideas, but it's all bad. But like I would say each story is just sort of slightly improving the realistic qualities of each. So in like 3 or 4
Yeah.
more iterations, once we have like the 50 Shades of Grey fan work and then 1 or 2 more, we should be at a story that's like sort of like real people.
There might be
Maybe.
some actual like emotional intelligence happening.
I mean, I could just do without the underage werewolf pairing. Like that's fine.
Yeah, the rest
And
of
it
it I'm pretty okay with. That's the one thing I'm just like I don't know how that got through.
well,
I
like
don't
similarly, I would say
know.
the main character in 50 Shades of Grey insists on wearing jeans while he has sex. Like he has a special pair of jeans that he wears just for sex, and
Really?
yeah, he has a name for them.
My sex jeans?
Uh,
My sex denims?
it's I mean, yes, but it's fuck. What is it? It's very specifically annoying. Uh, anyway,
I
that'll
can't
be a.
believe this is a real thing.
You should type into the internet. What does Christian Grey call his sex jeans? and,
Oh
and make sure
no.
you're not in incognito mode because I need that to be in your search history.
Okay. Call his
Actually,
sex.
while you do that, I'm gonna heat my coffee up.
Okay. Oh. Oh my god. Wait, there's so many articles about this. Oh no. Is that really what he calls them? Okay.
And what's the answer?
There's a lot of articles about this.
Really?
So the top one, the headline is, in case you wanted to know what Christian Grey really calls his sex genes, it's so much better than you imagined. Okay. Oh, this is... He calls them, I'll just read the excerpt.
Good.
In my closet, I strip off all my clothes from a drawer. Oh, and from a drawer, pull out my favorite jeans, my DJs, Dom jeans.
Oh, man. That's rough
Because
stuff.
his DJs, that is horrific. uh, okay, well, red flag number 380. Like so many. There's so many. How to find the perfect pair of Christian Grey fuck jeans.
Tip number 1, no zippers.
Oh man. That's great. What a
That's
specific detail.
That's one thing you could call it. I'm upset that I know that or anything about Twilight, but I'm also glad I do because I guess that's sort of my whole brand at this point. Anyway, um, I ate that musubi real quick. I actually had a tiny little note for pod food here. So let me introduce you to the other two things on this list. First, I have this this plate of WAP, as I like to call this wet ass
Ooh.
peach. It's like the last day that this is going to be good eating, I think. But they're in season and it's very good. And then I have this, which I drank half of. It's gross. Here, I named it Jesse's Podcast Juice. Let's slide that back on there. So this is like, originally it's a frozen drink that's like really heavily strawberry flavored, like fake strawberry flavored from Taco Bell.
Mm-hmm.
So about this much is gone, and then I poured my friend's homemade kombucha and about a shot and a half of rum into it. So let's see how that works out. Because it should be both, let's say, crisp and a little rough, I guess. I don't even know what to call that other than podcast juice. Ooh, doggy. That's something. And then I also have, let me grab some of this. Oh, that's got like 6 different flavors that hit at different times. Complex. I also have these.
Yeah. Yum.
Which are dark chocolate wafers. And they're very good. They're also like not very substantial. They just taste good, which is key to a good dessert. It's literally just like a wafer. And it just tastes like dark chocolate. There's like no other complexity to it.
That's nice.
But it's like a slightly lighter flavor.
That sounds pretty good.
And then
I have
finally,
to say I'm impressed about the color payoff of your Taco Bell concoction.
Yeah.
Considering it's halfway watered down.
It's so, like, aggressively red. Finally,
Ooh.
I have these Kraut Crisps. Which are cabbage chips that just smell like a dill pickle, and that's it.
That sounds really good.
They're very good. This is the first time I've tried them because I've been saving them, but if you need something that tastes like a dill pickle or tastes like dark chocolate, I have some European-ish foods for you.
That sounds good. I don't have anything other than my nice Easter egg or Easter leftovers M&Ms, which are fine. They're good. They're M&Ms.
Once you get through like half of that, you'll have a very short rain stick. So that'll work out nice.
That'll be good. And I have coffee, and I also have a white wine. That's very sweet. Yeah,
a sweet white wine is a good daytime wine for sure.
It's really good. It's called Vinyasa, and I got it from my boss sent me for my birthday a month subscription of the Wink thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I got 4 bottles of wine from there for a month just to like try, and I like this one the best so far. I think I've tried 2 other ones, but yeah.
I honestly, wine is something that I will probably never feel that strongly about. There's a few dessert wines that I wouldn't want to not be able to get. Limoncello's not a wine, but I kind of put it in the wine category for that stuff too.
I like that.
But there's I want to say it's like a Washington blackberry ice wine that that is the closest I get to like really giving a shit about wine, is that some of the ones that they make that are like specifically dessert wines, I wouldn't want to like not know about and not have access to if I really wanted it and had a way to get it. But when it comes to like white, red, like rosés, stuff like that, I couldn't care less. Like, I would rather try something new than have the same wine twice, honestly. Even if the wine ends up being bad, it's who cares? It's wine. Like,
it's wine. That's kind of my general feeling too. I'm by no means good at wine, so it's been interesting just to try different ones. I have one called Pacificana, which is a Merlot and apparently oak aged is what the bottle says. But actually, that makes sense. That one does taste kind of like more earthy than other ones.
Okay.
To get fancy. That one, the one I'm having right now, is kind of like peachy, kind of fruity. So,
if you get a chance, I want to say there's a Netflix documentary. It might be through somebody else, but I think it's an older Netflix documentary from like 4 years ago or something called like Sommelier. You should absolutely watch it because it starts off, it's just like, okay, we're going to follow around these like 4 sommeliers from different like settings and talk to them about wine, which is great because like as much as I like coffee is more my wine, like I actually care about the flavor and the region and all that, but like I will never take that stuff seriously enough to be somebody who gives a shit about like opinions on it. These 4 people, I think there might be one that's sort of normal and one who's extra weird, but it is basically a starting point for a documentary about like how adapt to bullshit are people able to get and still like be considered fancy. And it's just like sort of following them around, and it gets weirder and weirder, but then it'll be scenes of them like tasting a wine being like, oh yeah, there's accents of corpse and leaf detritus, and it's just like, sure, I guess like, it's rotten fruit, like it's gonna taste a little bit like that, but it's not important that people know that it tastes like old dry leaves unless they're as weird as you are and don't want to just try it. It's it's very good. The amount of stuff that they end up doing in terms of like, I want to say there's even sort of a moment where they don't point it out specifically, but like everybody tries this one wine and has a completely different thing to say about it that does not mesh at all.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's just kind of like towards the end, I want to say they end up having them all try this one wine, and it's so divergent an opinion that it's like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, everybody's going to have a different palate for wine. There is no wine palate. It's just something that rich people like in the same way that like younger people like a movie vlog or something, where it's like, we have an opinion about the Meg. Like, that's all wine sommeliers do, is give you their like 5-star review on the new shitty sci-fi movie, which in that context, I'm absolutely fine with it. I just think it's very funny how seriously people take it.
Yeah. Every time I think about people taking wine really serious, I just think of that Frasier episode where they do like the tasting competition to see who gets to be the president of the club because they're both running.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they end up like mixing 2 wines together, and it's stupid, but it's funny. But yeah.
If I remember, that episode has some of the same ideas in it.
Because they're like describing the wines and using words. I can't remember what Niles says that a wine is jammy, which is, I guess, a thing that they say, but it's funny. I don't remember what Frasier says, but
I don't think the word unctuous had come into being popular when Frasier was on, but that would fit the bill of how they are talking about it.
Yeah, I could see that.
We should do a Frasier podcast if we ever. That'll be a goal. If we ever have, I don't know, more than 300 viewers, we'll do at least a Frasier podcast.
I would love that. I've watched too much Frasier for that knowledge to go to waste.
When we went to that wedding on the edge of the rainforest, and I was staying in that shed with the like mattress on the top of it in the middle of the woods, I brought my tablet and enough battery and like 6 downloaded episodes of Frasier, and that's all I did when I wasn't at the wedding. When I was not asleep, was watching Frasier on a little screen, and then behind the screen were like owls and shit. It was very pleasant, very stupid.
That is a nice atmosphere.
That version of me that you and Evan saw and hung out with between sleeping in that shed and being at the wedding, that was me post Frasier and nothing else.
That was an interesting weekend. Just the atmosphere and the location, and also I can't remember if we had Wi-Fi where we were staying or not. I don't think we did.
You didn't? That place seemed like it would.
Remember? Maybe we did. I think it's phone service, and I'm thinking of it was almost non-existent.
The phone service in that area was garbage. There wasn't really phone service, which I personally like most of the time. I know I posted a video of me doing a cribs for the shed I was in, but I think that's about the extent of what the phone service could handle.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Now, man, there's a lot of people being idiots the last couple weeks. I don't think that's going to change, though. Let's see. I guess I probably want to end with this too, but I think it is worth mentioning that people should fill out the census. We only are supposed to have through the end of the year, so 5 more months or whatever. But we're halfway through, and like I think 40% is how much we have so far, which is not fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So people need to fill that out. If you go to it's like census.org, I think. It might be 2020census.org or .gov. Type in census. It'll take you straight to the website. And it doesn't really matter what search engine you use, but the census isn't something that is worth avoiding for really any reason. The only thing that the census is really used for actively is getting a sense of who is in the country as a total and what kind of policies that should get enacted. And there's no downside to filling out a census. I know that there's going to be anti-census people the same way there are anti-vax people. They're both wrong, and they both need to do it. So I guess that's my public service announcement is do that action. You can even fill it out like if you the way that my roommate and I filled it out, it's per household. So my roommate filled it out and just included my information. They don't need you to sign in with like a social security or something. It's literally just do the information and send it in, and they will verify it, and then you're done.
Yeah, it's pretty quick and easy.
Yeah, but that's a big part of like, I mean, if you're not upset at like the Democratic leadership or the Republican leadership, whichever you prefer, or all of them, if you're like us, you should consider the census something that is the little bit that you can do to try and like make that better in at least a small way. Because once that information exists, nobody owns it. It's just the country's information, and things like the size of minority populations and stuff like that is very important for us to know. And if you're a Republican, you have less ability to like try and do action against a group once you see the size of it. And if you're a Democrat, you have more impetus to do action that supports a group once you know that they're going to vote for you, because both sides suck. So you need to give the least excuse to avoid doing things to support people in the country.
Yeah.
If you want to avoid things like giving your information out and you feel like you're in danger, the thing to avoid is things like doing an ancestry.com thing or something like that. Like that's where it's dangerous. You don't want to like avoid things that are just country information though. So that's it. That's probably double the service announcement we need, but anybody listening who hasn't filled out the census should just do it.
Yep.
Along those lines, I spent part of my week, of course it was a work day that it happened, I pulled a muscle under my rib cage, and that fucking sucks. I was not expecting that to suck quite so much. I think that was actually the day after we did our podcast last week.
Oh, well, I'm glad. I guess hopefully you've had time for it to get better. Is it better than...
It only really stuck around for a day, but it all of those muscles in your core pull to the other side of your body. So I could like feel it in my back, and then like my chest was sort of bunched up because of it. It was all shitty. But do your seal stretch where you lay on your stomach and lift yourself up. I do that, but apparently not enough. So
it's a good stretch.
Keep up on it, even if that stretch seems like it does nothing, which it does for some people feel like that. So, and if you do a lot of sit-ups, maybe double it up, because I didn't. Let me get some of this podcast juice. Do you have something you would like to pivot to?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's probably a really good segue into my story about how I did Ancestry.com this week.
Oh, yeah.
So, do what Jesse says, not as Madison does. But I actually, so the way that this whole thing started is that my parents are remodeling their kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a bunch of old cooking ware and recipes from my great grandma, Mary, who has passed, or I think she died in like 2010. But she left us a bunch of like Japanese cooking books and stuff
Oh, okay.
because she's Japanese. Um, and so I was looking through. First of all, this book is super cool, and it has pictures that I'll show. Like, I don't know how good I could show these pictures. Probably
Yeah.
not super well.
I
But
already want a copy of that just from looking at.
isn't
Yeah,
it so
that's real
cool?
nice.
Like it goes through the common ingredients used in Japanese cooking, um, like all the seafood, and the picture is really nice. Bunch of like,
Those are all illustrations too.
yeah, yeah, they are really pretty. And then it kind of walks you through what kind of traditional Japanese cooking and meal customs are, which I really didn't know anything about. I would be curious to see what more like casual everyday cooking is like, especially now. But um, I just read through it and I learned about how like um, I guess traditional meals, like if you're going all out, like you have guests or something, you'll start with the like a clear broth. Um, and there's a name for this, but I can't remember what it is. But there's always a clear broth, and then there's three dishes after that, and it always goes in the order of grilled things, and then steamed things, and then simmered things, and it's always served in that order. I thought that was cool.
So you start with a clear broth as like a initial course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like your palate cleanser sort of beginning of the meal, I think. And then you do it, those three things always served in that order, um, and then after that, I think it's fried stuff. But one thing that I thought was cool is it talks about how, like, especially when you're watching anime and see any photos of Japanese cooking, you'll notice this that like they typically don't have matching sets of dishware. Like their approach to food is very much focused on like the presentation and the aesthetics of it. So every single dish is paired with a dish that will make it look the best. Right. And I thought that was really cool because I've always liked having mismatching sort of just random dishware anyway. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool.
That's unintentionally, that is how I have my stuff because I keep very few dishes. So like I have 2 large bowls, 2 plates, and a few different like presentational pieces of like dishware. And it's all either very dark, like handmade stuff. So I have like a uneven patterned like dark blue plate with like accents, and it looks like raku fired almost.
That's cool.
It's a food safe plate, but I also have a bowl that's similar that was a gift, and then I have a clear plate and a light colored bowl, and then a like serving platter that's like it's like a lake blue almost with like darker blue rimming, and all of that stuff is things that I kept specifically because I like the way stuff looks on it. For me, it was because I used to take photos of almost everything I would eat for like references and stuff, so I wanted it to look good. But now it's just like I don't have a use for more dishware than that. so I may as well keep the ones that look good. So I totally agree with that idea, at least.
Yeah.
Of like, don't worry about it matching, because nobody gives a shit about that unless they're assholes.
Right. I always just liked kind of the mismatchy look anyway. And I think it's just kind of boring to have everything all the same. But the other function of just the different dishes, like all different sizes and kind of mismatchy thing, was because typically foods are served kind of like one at a time anyway.
Yeah.
Not really like in the West, you just kind of put it all on your plate at the same time.
You pile it all on and let
You
the stuff
pile
that
it
you
all on.
like the most get cold.
That's only if you're just kind of weird and neurotic like me and you, but
Yeah.
but yeah. Yeah, I thought that was cool, but it going through that book and some of my grandma's other books kind of got me on a kick of just like I just want to look up and see what I could find about her, because she passed away when I was pretty young. Like I never really got to talk to her that much.
Okay.
So I looked her up and I was just kind of going through. I signed up for like a free ancestry.com trial to see the family tree and everything. Because I've always been curious, like who was the first on that side of my family, at least, who was the first people here from Japan.
Yeah.
And I was like under the impression that it was my great grandma, but she actually was born here. It was her parents who brought
Okay.
her here, or who had her here. So, but in doing that, I found, or my dad found, um, uh, what's the website called? It was called like Japanese American Military something. I'll have to find it, but
Okay.
somebody had actually conducted a bunch of interviews of guys who were in the 442nd company, I want to say it's called. I'm going to
Okay.
look this up because it's wrong, but it basically in World War II, it was just the Japanese only, not battalion. I don't know. I'm going to get it wrong. I don't know army terms.
I don't
Um,
either.
but Daniel Inouye was in it, the senator.
Mm-hmm.
So, but my great grandma's brother served in it, and so someone had conducted a bunch of interviews with him, and it was really cool watching the interviews and like hearing him talk about growing up in Idaho. I think they lived in Homedale, which is like southern somewhere.
Okay. Sure. I believe
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I don't know exactly. It's I don't know, probably within 50 miles of Boise. But uh, I I knew that my family never went to any camps or anything, but I didn't know the specifics of like what it was like where they were. And I guess um like they had their guns taken away from them, was what he said in his interview, and he was like 14 when Pearl Harbor happened.
Oh,
And
fun. That's a great age to be when that happens.
yeah, yeah, he I think was a sophomore in high school, and he talked about um remembering that like that year the school's tradition was for the underclassmen to walk the seniors out on their graduation day,
Mhm.
and the school people weren't going to let him and another girl who was Basque walk, just because of they were Basque and Japanese. Um, and the kids at the school actually like said they weren't going to walk unless they let them go, which was really cool. So it was really um, I guess, inspiring to see him talk about, like, he talked about a couple of, obviously it wasn't, people weren't super nice all the time. Like, he mentioned there were, in the town that they lived in, all the businesses put up signs that said, like, no Japs and stuff like that, and he just wasn't allowed to go there.
That's
But
fun.
what was cool is that he also talked about how like all of his friends and his peers, like all the kids his age, were nice to him, and that they, like, generally um, stood up for him. And, like, he mentioned that since he wasn't allowed to go into the restaurants, they, whenever they had baseball games, that they would stop at, like, halftime or whatever,
Oh
and
yeah.
and everyone would go get a hamburger, but he couldn't go in because they wouldn't let him in, and his friends would always bring him out food from the restaurant. So it was like, it was really cool just to know kind of what life was like for them, because I didn't know anything about it, and they're gone now, so you can't really ask them. Um, but also cool to hear that there were, like, good kids who stood up for him. Especially now, it's, like, nice to hear that, because it, I don't know. I'm sure, I don't know. Anyway,
I
sometimes
think,
like that, like, a glimmer of hope with with
yeah,
the kids now, but it was nice to.
there's uh there's always a good side to things, and it's pretty much exclusively good kids. Like, that's kind of the secret of moving forward socially, is that adults are never going to be as good. And
Mhm.
the more adults get used to it and get used to, like, how the world is to them. I hate the idea of how the world is, because it's such a reductive, shitty way to look at everything. But the idea of wanting to make things better on an individual level, to, like, influence the world around you, is something that gets labeled as childish, and it's not. Like, that's actively how, it's the exact same strategy that Republicans have used to push the country into a bad direction, is that. Uh, like, individual people trying to influence society is sort of the whole point. Uh,
Mhm.
Especially now that an individual can actively reach everybody if they do things the right way. Like, socially influencing people, you don't have to be like the president anymore. Like, you can be literally anybody as long as you figure out a way to do it. So as long as the kids are remaining not terrible, I think that we will keep moving forward. But it's literally up to, like, younger people always. Um,
Yeah.
and the handful of older people who understand that. Like, I think I don't know, there's not a lot of faults with Bernie Sanders in terms of, like, his actions, but there are, like, just things about being an older person that are going to make some of the things that he does less influential in a way. Uh, and I think him basically continuing to look at younger generations and taking what they need and what we've always needed and pushing them together is the whole reason why he was so popular as, like, a presidential candidate. Because, like,
Mhm.
somebody who talks like your somewhat passionate grandpa isn't going to appeal to most people unless they are saying the right things. And that's sort of, we need more people doing that. Thankfully, it looks like we're kind of pushing in that direction more. Like, every week there's a little bit more of
Yeah.
that. But as a transition, I'm even interested in still talking about what you found out, if you had any, like, revelations from it. But I think it's a good place to mention. We missed this in the last podcast because there was other shit we were talking about, but uh, a lot of people seem to be noting that, like, euphemistically, PragerU retweeted some stuff that was shitty, because they always do. Um, but there's not a ton of talk about when did it happen? Like 2 weeks ago? Yeah. So Trump Jr. retweeted a PragerU tweet that was a retweet of just a Nazi, like a full European neo-Nazi,
Oh,
full stop.
sick.
Somebody who has been like, what's his fucking name? I have this up. Oh, by European I mean British, by the way, because of course it would have to be British or Polish lately. It seems like. I feel like, come on, the internet is garbage in many
It
ways.
is. Yeah.
But one of the ways that it is especially garbage is how people prioritize ads over all forms of text. Yeah, so this guy's name is Mark Collette, and he's been like the subject of a couple different like writings and I think a documentary that are specifically about Nazis, like modern day Nazis, full stop. He is publicly in favor of like everything the Nazis were in favor of, and he was tweeting about a clip of a full recording of like an altercation at an airport between like black women and a white couple, which I believe was just them yelling at each other, and it like had security guards in the footage, but they were just kind of like standing off to the side in the clip he put up. I don't care about any of that, but he put up a clip of that video that basically just said like if the colors were reversed, the security guards would have intervened, was basically what it said. So already a stupid premise, but also coming from a Nazi. PragerU, who constantly repeats Nazi propaganda, including those clips I sent you that are hilarious, but very shitty. The fireside chat of him talking about like how he doesn't see color, he sees blood or whatever. Anyway, and how
God.
if you go to college, now you're a bad person, which is also frustrating and a common piece of rhetoric for people. But yeah, so PragerU retweeted it, and then Don Jr. retweeted it. They have to know who that is. It's a fairly like well-known person, and if you're politically minded at all, that would be like, oh, Colette put this up. That's probably bad. And it was bad enough to where like the Blaze, somebody from there, even put up a thing saying like, hey, you probably shouldn't retweet this. This is from like a Nazi. And the Blaze is pretty close to repeating Nazi rhetoric in the US as it is. So like if you have the Blaze coming down on your retweets, that's pretty bad. Anyway, I thought I would mention that because that's the president's son and a group of people who thinking conservatives or whatever like to refer to as like a weird kind of mind trust, even though it's just a guy. I'm going to start up Jesse U. I'm going to just start putting up videos of me sitting in a chair talking about the things that I think and start calling that university. I think that's really in good faith.
That. Yeah.
But yeah, so that asshole. Also, Prager looks like the stereotypical evil character in anything, which I also find ridiculous. Not even a fireplace and a dog sleeping next to him can make it look like he's not a complete ghoul. And that led nicely into all of the Ben Shapiro shit of last week and all that. So I just wanted to talk about that. Ben Shapiro showing up on Rogan, which I don't give a shit about Rogan. He's also a douchebag, but he's at least a somewhat... he's essentially centrist douchery. And
he's like the chaotic neutral douchebag.
Exactly.
Well, occasionally not so neutral.
Occasionally. So he's the voice that would be all of our parents, basically. And he even pushed back on Ben Shapiro in an interview lately when Ben Shapiro was trying to say that racism doesn't exist. So that's good. I
that it all comes down to personal choice.
I appreciate that even those dipshits are at odds because it means that there isn't just a unified voice telling people it's fine to be terrible. That mixed with, I think it was Hungry Bowtie, who I've suggested people follow in the past, had video of a woman in like I think a neighborhood just outside of downtown Portland, was coming out on her porch to yell at protesters with just a full-on Nazi armband on, red strip with a swastika and a white circle. And she got in a yelling match with like 2 or 3 people who had the nerve to come into her yard to yell at her about her fucking Nazi armband. And like nothing, I don't know, nothing really came of it, but it was somebody tried to grab it when she refused to either, well, first people were like, you need to go inside or we're going to do something about it, which, like, what are you going to do that wouldn't just bring the cops down on you anyway? But then more reasonable people were like, you need to go inside. Like, this is not good for anybody, and also it's just shitty.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to grab it off her once, and she acted very hurt by it, and then she was like standing in front of an open door, and one of the guys tried to like push her back into her house and just be like, get out. And she wouldn't go back into her house either, and she just kept standing there looking like very upset with like her cell phone out, like she was going to dial the cops, like it would matter. And eventually she went back inside, and people, I guess, came by late at night and sprayed "A Nazi Lives Here" on the front of her house, which honestly, cool. Without any of the like light physical shit, that's the correct move. But when people showed up, like, it was either on a route or people were just pissed off. People showed up on that block, and she had like 4 of her neighbors defending her like yard, and they ended up interviewing one of the neighbors, and his reason for it was like, you know, it's just people have a lot of like hatred and stuff, but I think it's important as an American citizen to defend people's views. It's like, I don't think defending Nazi views is in the purview of being fine, but
or like free speech of
free speech kind of cuts off when your free speech is that we should eradicate other people. That should kind of be the end of free speech in terms of...
That's usually the line that we hope for,
but, like, reasonably, who knows what's up with that lady? And it's... Thankfully, the neighbors were not good at speaking, so they did not make a compelling argument either, giving more fuel to people who want to be like, it's fine if I go outside wearing a Nazi armband is not high on my list. But that's... was there more in vaguely Nazi news? I forget. I don't think so.
There was kind of one, I think it's recent. It's been brought up to me recently in conversations. I don't know, like, exactly when this happened, but I was talking to a family member about a thing that Rutgers University put out talking about how they're going to um, shift their approach to like grammar in their English and literature program.
Okay.
Basically, I don't remember what the wording of the actual press release or whatever it was is, but basically what they're actually doing is just trying to be more inclusive, and when they have students who are like English as a second language, multilingual people, or just people who didn't have a good background in like correct grammar.
Hmm.
Basically, instead of alienating those people and like punishing them for that, uh, educating them on like whatever correct grammar is, whatever
Right.
in that situation is, and like basically just educating them on the history and the implications of grammar. Because, I mean, even like in literature or uh, analyzing writing in general, if talking about correct grammar, I feel like is
It
like,
can be a little bit dicey to call
yeah,
something that.
yeah, to call something correct grammar, because I mean, depending on how you're trying to analyze or read something, the grammar, whether or not it's correct, is still important. It just tells you about like the author and the time or the context of what's going on. And like correct grammar is not always it like it doesn't even matter. It's not communication just because they're not using that anyway.
There aren't a
Um,
lot of places where you can use the term "that's what feminism wants" to have it be exactly what you mean, I guess.
yeah, yeah, pretty pretty much. But a family member showed me this article that was like Rutgers University is uh, basically lowering their standards, and like not gonna they're like abdicating their responsibility as a educational institution and
Uh-huh.
basically just letting people use whatever slang they want. And that kind of argument was made. And I did about like 5 seconds of Googling and found, I think on, was it Reuters or something, that like that had the original text of the press release and just kind of explained like, no, that's not what they're saying. Um, but I mean, even I don't know, the the people in my family that I talked to, or not even just people in my family, when you find yourself being irritated at the idea of like traditional English or traditional grammar or correct grammar being not even challenged, but just like broadened or made to be more inclusive, and like your initial reaction is just like, they're tearing the system down. Like,
Yeah.
I don't. That's not a good thing, and I don't understand it. Um. Anyway, yeah, I
It's
don't know how
like
recently that happened, but
it's like everything though. As soon as you start bringing up the idea of widening the scope of what's acceptable, even like there are always going to be people who it doesn't matter what it is unless it's exactly what they want. They're always going to say this cannot happen. We live in a society, like that's how people react to that stuff, and it sucks.
right. And
But
I mean,
but as soon as you bring up something that somebody has been looking for specifically, they're fine with it. Like it's never not the case that they're just like, oh well, that's okay though. Everybody's like that, and it shows a lot of hypocrisy or just a lot of lack of thought, I guess.
yeah, just a real inclination towards um, getting offended or angry at just the status quo changing. Because I mean, they're not literally all they're doing is just trying to be more inclusive of people who I maybe don't know English as well. Like, it's not a problem. It's not like, and they didn't even, what I read didn't even go into details as far as like, we're going to grade easier or anything like that. It's just like, we're broadening the scope. And even like, especially in the context of like literature and studying English and that stuff. I mean, language is changing all the time. There's no, like, especially if you're analyzing and interacting with that stuff at a college level, it makes more sense to just broaden the scope as opposed to honing in and focusing on the binary of, is this correct or not? You're talking about like the history of things and what it means, and it makes more sense to not penalize people for being wrong and instead like have a conversation. But I guess we can just get mad about it instead. I don't.
And honestly, the more like fluid and adaptable we can keep our society, the more, especially important now, we can understand the context of history. Like, as soon as you stop relying on the idea that it's just always been this way, the more you can actually like grapple with changes and how things are actually like adjusting.
Yeah.
That's like in a lot of ways, I think that affects people who lived through things like your great grandfather or grandfather living through Pearl Harbor, like people who was it. Okay, so your great grandfather being young when that happened, that would cause a large change in like just the way you perceive life, I would imagine. Having that happen, kind of like, you know, in a lot of ways, having things like the introduction of like technology as a milestone instead of now where it happens so often that it barely matters. Like, nobody gives a shit about VR. VR was a big deal, and it has been in the past as well. But having something like that, or for us having like the 9/11 attacks, I think actually can benefit you in some small ways of understanding that like it isn't a paradigm shift when something in the world happens like that. It's actually just something that you have to deal with. It's another event that needs to be like answered to in some way. And if you can start to pull some of the stress aside and start to like learn how to actually act around that kind of stuff, it makes things more like graspable, I guess. Like, a lot of the people who lived through a lot of very severe actions in like the first half of last century, they also went on to start pushing a lot more towards like civil rights and stuff. And shitty people pushed in the other direction. So like it came out a little bit better in some ways and worse in others, but like change, I think, is really important to sort of internalize as a good thing, or at least as a neutral thing that you can make good or bad decisions from. And like the 80s and 90s are a great example of how completely shitty people can act when that's the base of their adult life, where they grow up and it's like, well, business is kind of shitty, and we had a president that was kind of shitty, and we just sort of like stretched it out for like 20-25 years of the same shit. Like, those types of things post like the Vietnam War are just and I think that negatively impacted a lot of people who were already in a very comfortable generation to then believe that any effect on that comfort was an affront to them as opposed to necessary change. We really have to get over that shit if we're going to do something about the police and give like real human rights to people who aren't white, or at least presenting white. Like, all that stuff has to change. And the sooner people get used to the idea of it being good, the better.
Yeah. I think It's funny because I've always grown up hearing that like, oh, people are more like left when they're younger, and then when they're older, you get more conservative.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the line I've always heard. But like, it's not happening because I mean for a lot of reasons, but especially for like our generations because the comforts the previous generations have experienced are not going to be afforded to us. So we have to think
Yeah.
about these things. But
Well, and when I talk to older people, when I talk to like a generation or so above me, the um, the conversation about like how terrible wages and how terrible like work is for like millennials and Gen Xers all the way down. Like even people who are like in their early 40s are people who are like still being like sort of strangled by our economy and the way that that works. But talking to like older people as well, when it comes to money, the thing that I always get told by them is, well, I'm not going to get to retire either, as though like that's the important thing that we're all fighting
I
for, is that they'll get to retire.
don't know.
That also happens with like I don't know, just like benefits in general. A lot of people talk about how terrible their like ability to get help where they need it is, but they will ignore the fact that like people who are under them have it substantially worse every generation now. And
Yeah.
like other than I think the Generation Z is probably going to surpass Generation Y in like allotment of funds. Like they're going to be slightly richer, and that'll probably continue unless we actually make changes. Uh, it doesn't really mean anything for like the structure of our country. Like nobody gives a shit about Generation X, including me most of the time, even though I know a fair amount of people who are in that generation. And uh, a lot of those people are fairly outspoken, but because of how much older they were when a lot of this stuff got really bad, they had either found a spot to kind of like stay hidden and safe, or they had just sort of given up on it. So, like, I think it really does come down to convincing people it can change in order for us to like move forward. And hopefully that doesn't require a whole bunch more garbage happening in the middle, because
Mm.
that's not my favorite. Speaking of garbage in the middle, I don't think that's a good transition, but who cares? That I want to update on that Beirut explosion now that there's more info about it. Um, the current stuff about it. Thankfully, the people talking about it being an attack sounds like that was reactionary. Unfortunately, that includes our shitty president. But um, it looks like it actually is yet another thing that is holding up both the we need reform of our like work conditions and shit like that. Uh, did you hear about it before I go on?
No, sorry, you lagged out a few seconds, but I haven't heard much about this at all.
Okay, so apparently there were at least one like inspector or uh, person who was knowledgeable in like the stuff they were containing. Um, at the harbor, they had a bunch of I think it was a Russian shipment of like material they use for like mining and stuff like that. Like I forget what the it was a compound or something that's basically just an uh, industrial compound. Apparently, it was a similar industrial compound to what caused a few explosions in the U.S. that were less significant in like the last 20 or 30 years. But um,
Mm.
the person who was analyzing the way they had it stored and stuff. And they had it stored for too long, and they had it stored unsafely. Apparently, a few weeks before the explosion, said, we need to do something about this, or it's going to blow up all of Beirut. So they knew about it, but it looks like the culprit in this case is industrial regulations being lower, which is a pretty spot on way of sort of pointing towards a lot of the problems that are coming up lately with like people who want money realizing the only way to get it is to stop keeping anybody safe except for themselves. And then you end up with a big part of a city blowing up because you just don't give a shit anymore. So that's fun. It's not really better for anybody involved than the it was an attack thing that people thought it might be. But I think that the actual like path forward makes a lot more sense, which is let's not continue to let our fucking administration deregulate things if we don't want to have the exact same shit happen here or other places. I don't know. It's a real bummer still, but I'm glad that people are continuing to look into it and figure out what the fuck happened, because that's a real scary event to just have up in the air. Like, oh,
yeah, yeah. I'm glad to hear, I guess, that it wasn't anything like that. Not that that makes it any different for the people who had to deal with it, but yeah.
Decent time to say there's a fair amount of like Lebanese and Beirut assistance funds. That might be if you have already funded the protests, especially maybe toss a little side money over to help with that, because that situation fucking sucks. I don't know. I've also seen sort of on the topic of protest, sort of an uplifting like through line over the last week or so with the street reporting videos that are coming out. It looks like, well, besides people starting to get phalanx together, which is helping, like learning ways to create a line that the cops can't break through is really useful.
Yeah.
The other thing that's been happening is a lot more arrest resistance when people are grabbed for no reason, including a, in context especially, very funny video of a cop trying to grab a protester and another protester just fully clotheslining the cop to the ground. Like, the cop like goes in the air and then lands like flat, and it is very amusing to watch.
That sounds nice to watch.
And it was that video and a few others have started getting dedicated to people who live in countries where they will get shot if that happens, which is sort of a like remember the sort of bit of freedom people still have to recognize for what we're doing. So people have started doing call outs of like, this is for France or places like that, as a like, hey, we know you can't do this and live, but we're going to, because fuck them, which is good. That's definitely something we need to keep doing. I think the whole idea of letting it persist without any change, without any ramping up on the protester side, while that is a more comfortable idea, if you're in the party of thinking like the protesters just standing there will fix it, you're not wrong necessarily. It does bring some eyes But I think most of the people who think that also think that the protests aren't going as strong as they were because they're not seeing video of it. And it's going at least as strong as it was before. They just don't report on it. So if you say aren't on younger media parts of the internet, you're just not going to see those videos happen. And you're not going to read that reporting because that's not your priority when you're comfortable with your life, I guess. But in that, one of the things I wanted to talk about real quick, this kind of relates both to, I have two things. Both are useful. I guess first, I will talk about this because it's directly related to the thing that I'm mentioning. So a lot of people on the right like to reference over the last 20 years or so posse comitatus as a rule in our law that dictates when you can and can't use different parts of your enforcement in the country. And the problem with it is, like a lot of things in our Constitution, there are ways to interpret it if you just take snippets of it and stuff like that to say this is what it means as opposed to this. So I'm going to read. Let's call this a fiction. Let's see, nonfiction, shady nonfiction corner. In Natalie's honor, I will read this out. So let's see. So this is in regards to posse comitatus. Whenever the president considers that unlawful obstructions, combinations, or assemblages, or rebellion against the authority of the United States make it impracticable. Impracticable. You know, when words are stupid, maybe things like adjusting grammar for people to understand everything is important. Anyway, make it impracticable to enforce the laws of the United States in any state or territory by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings. He may call into federal service such of the militia of any state and use such of the armed forces as he considers necessary to enforce these laws or to suppress the rebellion. So that by itself is what people are trying to say holds up Trump using the military. That's sort of the basis of what they're doing. It continues, though, with the president, by using the militia or the armed forces or both, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy, if it, one, so hinders the execution of the laws of that state and of the United States within the state, that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law. So the thing that's important to take from that second part is that while the president does have the ability to call in essentially any law enforcement available to our country or militia to defend something if it's considered unlawful combination. Mm-hmm. Again, wording not the best in some of this old writing, but is on the basis of requiring that part or class of its people are deprived of a right. And what that delineates for what our president is doing with calling in military to push up against protesters and abduct them and commit violence against them is that their protesting apparently includes not being protected by the First Amendment at all, because it requires you to be deprived of a right. There is a stipulation of why you can do it. So in that case, the only right that's being deprived is, I guess, what, the right to have a comfortable city environment. Like, I don't know what that right is supposed to be. And I believe that is a big part of why things like the Blue Lives Matter stuff gets pushed so hard, because it's clearly not good usage against Black Lives Matter, because it's not a person. Like, blue lives refers to a vocation you've chosen. So it's never going to be the same thing. But if you can push the idea that these people are an oppressed class, which is the most laughable fucking way to refer to the police, then you can start saying that their rights are being violated by people not doing what they say, I guess. But that second part of what posse comitatus is, which is literally just the like, again, inscrutable word combination that they decide to use for something that we could update, that would be fine. That is like being used as sort of in the past, why, like, well, Obama can't do this, or whatever power we decide is against us, they're moving around the military and we consider that bad, even if they're not actually doing law enforcement of any kind. This by itself, though, if you read it, specifically states why what the president is doing is unlawful. Unless they want to, like, somehow find a way to say that, honestly, the owner of Walgreens, or I don't think Walgreens was targeted, but the owner of like a Target or something, who literally came out and said, we're okay with this, is having their individual rights trampled, I guess, by a large group of people who have decided that fuck this Target. Like, you could make a case that their rights are being trampled, but I don't think that you could make that case in a compelling way that it was, like, not started by people oppressing them in the first place and literally stripping away their rights from the beginning. Like, that's sort of the point. The second thing that I wanted to mention, because it works into the idea of rights and, like, making people aware of stuff, and it works into the idea of universities sort of changing the way that we talk about issues so that we can be more informed. I don't know what my solid thought on like who's leading it or why it started initially, but I completely agree with the idea behind the 1619 Project. Do you know anything about that?
Vaguely. Not a whole lot about it.
Okay, so the 1619 Project is it's like a collaboration between like educators and the New York Times, I think, which normally I would be like, well, let's not have the New York Times help with that. That seems stupid. But the upside to having the New York Times be involved is that they are a very effective way of getting the word out about it. And I'm not so sure that an independent group that isn't far right wing and already something that reporters would love to report on is going to get any kind of traction in our current climate of talking about COVID, completely ignoring the human rights violations of not wearing a mask, and then also completely ignoring the protests unless, like, a cop gets kicked in the balls or something, because that's the most important thing. The 1619 Project wants to denote school teaching history of the U.S. back to when the first slaves got to the U.S., because that is technically, in our own definition, when, like, America would have started up, as opposed to, like, when the Mayflower hit or whatever. Like, it takes a actual idea of interaction with the country and the people who would settle it and stay settled on it interacting with the country, and it doesn't avoid the part where like slavery built a huge amount of it. And I think that's super important. Like, hopefully it continues to pick up traction. Just the fact that people are so pissed about it is a good sign, I guess. But as an idea, it's something we probably should be fine with if you're reasonable. Teaching more of our history and being honest about, like, not saying that slaves were what was the wording, doing chores for people, like that fucking Texas textbook said. And the 1619 Project is also something that that dipshit Senator Tom Cotton, who like neo-Nazis want to have run for president in the future, he was making a claim that if people want to teach the 1619 Project's ideas in school, then they should defund those schools because it's hurting our children, which is also like, I don't agree with that in the least. Like, I think when you're a child, if you're going to school and people start teaching you history, you could teach them that the dinosaurs started our country, and even that being completely untrue, the idea of something like that is not disturbing to a kid. So the idea of teaching the actual history being disturbing to a kid is crazy. Like, you just need to make sure there's a basis for people to not just believe that, like, slaves didn't have it as good as white people or some bullshit like that. Like, we should be honest about this stuff. I would also like to see, and I hope it's included in that stuff, but it wouldn't go back far enough for some of it, the fact that our settlements on the East Coast are largely displacing old First Nation settlements that were gigantic. Like, maybe taking some of the accounts of people who came here originally, talking about all of these fucking people who already lived here, who had slightly different cities than we do, but like cities nonetheless, and like a very structured way of living. Eradicating all those people shouldn't be left out of our history. Like, we don't have to be the people from the past. We can learn about all of that really shitty stuff and use that to continue being better people. So, I don't know. There's controversy around it, but I suggest looking into the 1619 Project. It's a really good idea for schools to actually pay attention to that stuff. And if for no other reason than, like, learning about Washington history in this state fucking sucked. They did not talk about anything except, like, well, this is how the courthouse showed up. And it's like, who gives a shit? Like, maybe in 100 years when the courthouse is moved to a new city or something, yeah, tell me about how the courthouse showed up there. But, like, they always leave out the parts that are actually informative of why different parts of the country or state or wherever you happen to be centered on are the way they are. Like, people leave out the point that Tacoma, being like the larger city that's south of Seattle, not larger than Seattle, but the large city that's south of Seattle, Tacoma was meant to be the, like, industrial super city that Seattle is trying to be. Like, that's where it was going to be, but it just wasn't as nice there, so people stayed in Seattle. Like, there are aspects of the way that things worked out, and, like, the reason why you don't go to Tacoma, and it's like, there's so much space that they're using here, and so few people for how much space there is, and everything is sort of like a dead city and a city growing out of it. Like, you want to know why things are the way they are, and they just leave that out of teaching you history in general. So I think that's really important, and I think that if nothing else, we could fucking leave Thanksgiving behind. Columbus Day seems like it's almost out, and Thanksgiving is sort of a bullshit day. And maybe we could take Thanksgiving, put it in the garbage where it belongs, and then have, like, we could, honestly, it would be great to take some important days that First Nations people have and incorporate that into what we actually celebrate here, so we can start thinking about it more. The way that, like, you know, every year calendars add more holidays that are from other cultures or from our own culture that we forget. And I think that's really important. That's how I initially learned more about Juneteenth. Is I got a calendar that fucking had it on there. I was like, "Is this a fake holiday?" And it's like, "Oh shit, no, it isn't." So like, that stuff's really important, and teaching history is a good idea, I guess. Is the whole
Yeah, I
summation of
mean,
what I'm saying.
that would be, it would be so important just to understand how things are now, like, because like growing up in northern Idaho, or Idaho in general, or anywhere in the US, there are like reservations, but you're not like, no one teaches you why things are the way they are. Like, no, there's a very glossed over, just brief history about like, oh yeah, like this is how things got kind of set up, but like
Yeah.
nothing beyond that, which kind of blows my mind, being so close to those places and having like no understanding of the history of like the Nez Perce people, for
Mhm.
example, or like any of that. And yeah, I mean, especially for like Juneteenth, I learned about that this year.
Yeah,
Like,
a lot of people did. If it weren't for that calendar, it would have been a lot later for me too. Like, that's just not taught to people. Uh, I
yeah.
I also think that there's a depressing amount of people who talk about Utah and talk about Mormons, but don't know why Utah is named what it is. And there's like an entire tribe called the Ute from Utah that people are just like, huh? Like, I've talked
Yeah.
about the Ute with multiple people because my Natalie, my college roommate, is from Utah, and as soon as it's like, wait, there's a tribe there that it's named after, like, that's just not a thing people really think about. Like, there's so much in this country that is based on the people who are originally from this country, and we just act like it never happened.
Coeur
It's
d'Alene is named after like the name that French settlers, I guess, gave to. I don't actually know I don't even know the name of the actual tribe that lived
Yeah.
there. I think now it's just the Coeur d'Alene people, but I don't even know the original name. But I mean, it blows my mind that um in Coeur d'Alene, the main like downtown street, all
Mhm.
of that was built around Fort Sherman. The main street still called Sherman. Like, Sherman is a total piece of shit. If you
Uh-huh.
do if you do like 2 seconds of Googling, you go, oh my god, okay, like clearly this person should not be nothing should be named after this person, no
Yeah.
matter what side of the Civil War that he put on. But yeah, like we don't grow up knowing anything or being
Mhm.
taught anything about that.
Well, in the way that like Martin Luther King Way exists in so many different
Mm.
cities and stuff, but you don't really like it. It comes off as like, oh great, Martin Luther King, I like that person, but you
We
don't think
solved
about
it,
the fact
guys.
that, yeah, you don't think about the fact that that street is almost always used for redlining. Like, that is like, anybody who is in favor of keeping people in their place looks at Martin Luther King and goes, "Oh, they've already told me where that is." Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's rarely as good a reason or not as bad a reason as you believe it is. The upside to living in Seattle, where I'm starting to see more upsides the longer I'm here, even if there's plenty of shitty stuff here too. But the amount
Me
of
too.
yeah, the amount of First Nations named areas that we kept is pretty cool. Like, I don't think it's as cool as we should have been. Read the history of Seattle. It fucking sucks. But the also for unions, Seattle and like logging and some other industrial unions have a interesting history. But um, there's like we have the Hoh rainforest, we have Duwamish and Sammamish areas. We have a lot of areas that like at least through name give you the implication of like, should I look into that? And you should. Like all of that stuff is very useful, and it's usually kind of depressing. So like that's honestly, reading something that is depressing and shouldn't be the way it is a great place to start for actually like doing something about it.
Yeah.
On that, I'll say there's not any real updates in the Kirkland street art scene. Activism is a little stagnant this week, but I'm sure there's something going on. There's a lot of actually there is one update to Kirkland. People are screaming here at night often, and it seems to be every time. So none of it has been like actually an emergency of any kind, but it seems like people are pent up in a way that is very noticeable and getting extremely angry or just very wound up in the middle of the night when I walk. And it's been happening consistently, which is the only reason why I bring it up. I've gone on night walks here for a long time, even before COVID made that like more of a necessity for me to be comfortable and outside more. And it's always been the most dead place on earth, like walking around here. Like in the last month, there's been people walking their dogs later and later, which I feel like is a defense mechanism against the heat more than anything. But there are people almost every night that I go out now, somewhere, just angrily screaming out of their windows about something. And it's usually like somebody else is making a noise, or people are driving around and just like pent up, or people are drunk down by the water. And it's disconcerting when it is dead silent in the middle of the night and you hear somebody scream as though the person next to them just died. Like it's those screams of like, it's not high pitched, it's not low pitched, it's like without any control. It's interesting. It definitely gives me like every other night like adrenaline boost for a second, where I look around and try to figure out like, is something real fucked up happening, or is that just somebody being an asshole again? But I don't know.
Yeah, that would be really disconcerting.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't noticed any weird night screams around here. My neighbors are getting louder, though. I do feel like people, like, my apartment complex has been normally very quiet, but I do feel like people are gradually getting more like, I cannot keep my sounds inside of these walls.
Yeah.
Or I will go crazy. 'Cause, I hear very loud TVs and people just opening their doors and windows and everything and just playing their instruments as loud as they can. It's pretty nice, actually, but it's just funny. People are tired of being like in their little bubble.
Yeah, and the fact that it is all an avoidable bubble that we're just kind of stuck in, I think makes it worse for a lot of people.
I keep seeing a lot of things on like Twitter how people in Europe are like doing things and on their vacations, and we're all still stuck inside.
People in Australia have been talking about how scary the U.S. is for a while now. And keep in mind, Australia has a hard right-wing anti-intellectual group as well. Like, they are having the same political problems we are, and they have a lot of racism against China. Like, they have similar issues to the U.S., but they handled their shit quickly and well. Almost as quickly and well as New Zealand, but they have more people, I think, for density.
Yeah.
And, like, the Australians in the US are like, man, I wish I was in Australia. And the comments about the US from Australia are like, God, fuck that place.
I mean, from like anywhere about
sense.
the US right now are just like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
What's happening? But did you see the other interview that Trump did the other day? I can't remember the interviewer's name.
What,
Chris
the
Hayes?
Axios one? Well, there's Chris Hayes and there's Axios. Those are the two recent ones. Chris Hayes, wait,
The
Chris
one that's
Hayes?
getting memed a lot. Is he the one that was making like the face?
No, that's the Axios one.
Okay. I don't remember his name.
It's like Jason or something. I forget his name too. They, unlike the Fox News people, Axios is sort of, at least in my understanding, they're known more by Axios than they are their individual reporters, which is probably correct for a news company. Yeah. But they're also like, it's weird because places like Axios tend to be not incredibly liberal. They're more neutral news for the most part. They just have a lot of things to say negative about our administration lately, and they have a pretty good reason for that.
Yeah, that interview was
rough.
I mean, just as disappointing as the rest of them, but I kind of was irritated a little bit with it. Felt almost a little bit performative on the reporters and just the way that he was kind of reacting to Trump. It seemed like they were like trying to get him to say dumb things. Like, not that you have to try, obviously, but I mean, I guess I don't have anything against that. It's just
the idea of the way that we report being be a vector for other people and just stay out of it, I think does work with this president. I think him reacting to things in a fairly reasonable way is actually the right thing to do right now. Because if Trump had answered all that stuff the same way, and the guy had just sat there like, it would still read as weird, but I think that some of that slightly more performative, like wide-eyeing when he says stuff is actually kind of necessary for some people to see, because without that, it's easy for people with like the way people pay attention to stuff lately to just skip it. And it's something that if you're able to do that and not come off as like completely dishonest, which I don't think they did, I think that's probably a good tactic. That's actually worked really well in the past with like a Bernie Sanders campaign, where people will say stuff and he's like, really? And like, those are always the things that are like, yeah, they're kind of performative, but they get people to talk about it, and that's probably a good idea. But I mean, fucking Trump showing up with a handful of fucking loose paper and then handing you these like nonsense graphs about like, see, this one says America good though, that is the actual response you should have to that shit. It's just that we're all too jaded at this point towards him to have that response. So you have to have like the performance of an outsider when you have conversations with him to get that point across anymore.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. I think it is just being jaded that we're all just like, I don't know.
Like, if it was us doing that interview, the natural thing to do would be, like, sitting on a fainting chair, just being like, hey, so do you think we're doing good still? Like, just not being involved, but asking questions and wanting to take a nap is, like, the real way people would act, but that's not going to get the same attention, I don't think. And it's not going to get taken seriously by the president in that.
Mm-hmm.
The fact
Yeah.
that it was taken seriously is important. Uh, Also, I agree. I've heard from several places now the his response of like, "You can't do that," is the perfect encapsulation of like what the boomer line on when people want to change things is
Yeah.
like, "But I don't like it." Like that's exactly what we're against, like in everything. So I appreciate that they got that reaction as well.
That was a really good clip. I really did enjoy that. You can't do that.
So stupid. So like not even stupid so much as insanely selfish. Like there's clearly from that interview you get the feeling that there is no thought towards anybody else. It's just look, this makes me
Yeah.
look good and that's what I'm telling you to say. And that's it.
It's just like so purely infantile. Not even just in like maturity level, but even understanding. Like he doesn't even understand the like object. Excuse me. The object permanence of like people being tested and like you having the virus or not being independent of whether you go get tested. Like he doesn't even understand that. Like I'm glad it's getting uh recorded, I guess, and
Yeah.
that people are having to see it. Um but I just
I mean, think
yeah.
about if either of us were to ever have children when they were like in their, I don't know, 20-ish range, showing them that video, provided we have like a even slightly normal life at that point. Uh,
Mm.
think of how fucking crazy that would look if you saw that as like how a president acted when you were like 12. Like it's just not a way that human beings like acting that like self-serving as somebody who represents literally everyone in the country is I don't think it takes much to understand why that's bad. And I think that's why it is an effective thing to really have out there and public.
Yeah, cuz I do agree that there are probably 10, 11, 12, 13 year olds who are watching that and thinking like I can communicate better than
Yeah.
the president of the United States, and that's got to be pretty formative.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so, yay.
Nice.
Nice, great. Uh,
I want to tell you that it's great to be here in the greatest country in the world. Uh,
uh-huh.
Much love to all the other countries that helped get us here. It's really, it's tiring being at the top, but you get used to it after a while. You just keep winning, you know?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
day after day. That's what we do.
Uh,
All we do is win.
uh,
uh, uh-huh.
uh,
Oh, I think my other favorite quote from that interview, speaking of all we do is win, was, God, what did he say? He says, he's looking at that graph and he goes, see, we're first, which means that we're last, which means that we're best. It's like he said we're the best, which means that we're the worst, which means we're the best. I don't know. He something of that to that degree. Just operating within that like 800 word vocabulary of only extremes.
that's my escape from a lot of this cool business lately has been finding accounts on YouTube which are just cameras. I can't tell where they're mounted. They must have some sort of trolley for it because it's too still. And it's a camera and people just walking around like different major city areas in Japan. And I strongly suggest it because first off, they're filmed almost exclusively like the end of last year, so it's before everybody was like having to stay inside. And also they have ones that are in like downtown like Tokyo and stuff like that. Tokyo's in doing this, I also like wanted to look up like Tokyo's size and density and all that again because it's crazy. But walking around the parts of Tokyo that have like the thin streets still, but they are just packed with shit, and I forget how much of my de-stressing and relaxing is based around being in busy parts of the city and not having anywhere that I have to be, and being able to go to art galleries and the cafe and then like meet up with people at the end of the evening. That's like my entire self-therapy is based on that when we're not in this situation of just like, hey, I live in a city by an inlet of the ocean, but by the ocean, and I can go have cheap, good coffee and go to a art gallery for free and just walk around, and that shit's really important to me. And this is sort of giving me like a little bit of that. But in addition to that, I get to see like parts of Tokyo have a very Honolulu downtown. No matter how small Honolulu is, it does have a like feel to its structure, and it's totally based off of Japan. Like they grew up together with people with similar ideas, clearly, because it's like the streets are very similar. The way that they construct their outdoor stuff is very similar, and it just makes me want to go. If I ever had enough money to like do work and then like sell things online, I would absolutely want to spend a chunk of my life living in an area like that where like it would be, a struggle for language and stuff like that. But more than anything, living in a city that isn't the city that I already am accustomed to, and being able to go outside, look in any direction, know that I could walk through the city for a good hour, no matter where I go, and just find like all of these shops that sell you a dish of some kind, and be able to go to a different place like every day of the month and just see what the fuck is out there. The idea of living like that is probably like the top of my dream list of just like, that sounds like doing that, and then like painting, or like I've started updating my Redbubble again, so I have on what it's like Sour Buddy. I don't think there's an underscore on Redbubble, so it's just Sour Buddy is my name on there. I've started uploading some stuff again, and I want to get some of our shirt ideas finally somewhere like that. And I don't know, living that kind of life, if I ever made money off of like artwork, would be amazing. It would still never include retiring or doing anything but renting a place or anything like that, but at least it would be personally fulfilling, and I think that would be really cool. What's your dream job?
I mean, honestly, that I very similar to what you've said. I do like the idea of like just being able to walk out my wherever I live and then just peruse and walk around
You can't
different
do that where you
shops
are?
for about half a mile. uh, Food is a really big part of what I enjoy as like just a way of experiencing the world. I'm finding that's a really big part of like
Yeah.
me as a person. So I think um it's interesting that we're talking about this because Evan and I are looking at places to move, like when he finishes up school. So we've been thinking about that too. But yeah, like somewhere where diversity of people and food is a thing is like
Yeah.
that's I have to have that, or I'll just be sad. And yeah.
Well, let me suggest moving. I mean, living here would be cool just because, but moving somewhere that I want to go so that I can visit and do some of that too. Uh,
Uh-huh.
that's very important, I think.
Yes.
um, uh, I don't know. I always think about where I could possibly live. I've talked to Nick a bit about this too, when he thinks about like where he would like to live at some point. Uh, the idea of living somewhere and having enough space to have like a constant rotation of somebody you know visiting seems like the best. Not 24/7 every day of the year or anything, but just
Mm-hmm.
having it available for people to like take the cheapest vacations possible seems like the best kind of place to live. I can't imagine living in a place that has multiple rooms though. That seems fucking crazy to me.
Mm. Yeah, actually, yeah. Now, yeah. Now that I'm looking at apartments and stuff, I really do like having just like one or maybe two separate rooms.
Hmm.
Um, in the future, I do want to either have a place to go to work, like an office space, or a
Yeah.
different room. I don't like my current work setup because it's just like my work and my life is all in the same place, especially right now, and it's kind of driving me insane. But
My
uh,
favorite place that I lived for working was a complete shithole, but what it had was it wasn't really a fully separate room. It had like sort of a sliding door, um, but it was a sun room essentially that had like a
mm,
window that was just out. I guess it was just out towards the back of the house, and I when I ended up single and like in just sort of like a state where it was more important to get other people to live in the house with me to help pay than it was to like have any sort of like room situation. I discovered that that sunroom was in fact the best room, even though it was tiny, because all I want is to be cold, to have the ability to look outside, and to have fresh air and uh, like natural light. And in uh, being in that tiny space, I got all of that. And if I could find a place that has something like that as a pseudo private space and then a second room, that would be enough space. And honestly, that could be the size of the room I'm in now in its entirety and still work. It just requires like it requires a place that is built for, you know, uh location as opposed to like quality of life, and unfortunately location is often more expensive. So
yeah, yeah.
but on in your case, once Evan's done with school, there's a very good chance he could get paid decently. So you guys might have the ability to actually do that, which would be cool.
Yeah, I've been kind of telling him that, like, right now is the time of our lives. Well, not the time of. Now is like, this is going to be the easiest time in our lives to move and go somewhere.
Yeah.
Because this is the least amount of stuff we'll ever have. And I don't know. I kind of like, I really want to move somewhere new. I think that's the biggest thing for me right now is I want to live somewhere that I haven't before.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Seattle and Washington, and I would consider moving back there if that's kind of how that worked out. I'd be fine with it, but I don't know. I'm not really sure. I've been kind of excited about the idea of moving to Portland just because I really like the area. It, like, right now seems like a really weird time to be like,
yeah.
but I really like it. And
Portland has a really interesting art scene,
mm-hmm.
and they have a lot of shitheads, but like not, I don't know, it's in a different way than Seattle does. Like, Portland is smaller and the shitheads are more apparent, I guess, is the only difference.
I think so.
I also think that their water side sucks, but like, I'm sure a part of that is just like my weird ingrained Seattle pride at this point, because I think a lot of places Seattle like kind of is a head and shoulders above when it comes to their port. California actually has good waterside stuff, though, so I don't think it's entirely a bias. San Francisco,
yeah, I think I'd
has a
agree
real
with
nice
that
waterfront.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that too. I would probably prefer Seattle's waterfront over what I have experienced of Portland. The part of the draw of Portland to me is just that I like the coast, like the Oregon coast.
Yeah, it's really nice. And more strip clubs.
Of course, that's also one of my like top 10 reasons. Portlandia is also one of my top 10 reasons. Yeah, I don't know. I'd also consider like it would be really cool if I found the right place, if we found the right place and Evan found a good job or whatever. New York would also be really cool just for
New
like
York's
a
always
short,
a good option.
yeah, just like for a little. I don't think I'd like that long term, but just to experience it for a little bit, I think that would definitely be worth it.
The little bit of time that I've spent in New York, I think that in a weird way, it's the most relaxing place you can be, if you're like me at least.
I love it. The one time that I've been
yeah,
there.
there's such a rush of people that it doesn't have the time to get as insular as a lot of other places. Like, Seattle has an issue of once you know the people in a neighborhood, you realize that the people in the neighborhood next to it are the same people. And the only places in Seattle that I think are really unique are the places that have been sort of oppressed out of getting to be part of the city. So, like, for me, it's the districts of Seattle really are Capitol Hill, downtown, SoDo, Queen Anne, and like the west side of the U district over to like Ballard is one place. There's people in Ballard and Fremont who are like, oh, we have such a unique area. It's the exact same place as Queen Anne. Like, there's nothing different about it. They just have a street that they like to dress up, same way Capitol Hill does. Yeah. But those places are the same. And then you have like Georgetown and West Seattle, which is basically West Seattle is the bad side of Georgetown. And then you have and West Seattle has a large amount of people that came over from the East Coast, and that's like at least we're not in downtown Seattle part, and then Georgetown is tiny Portland. And those two places kind of mesh together because of location, but that's a weird neighborhood. But that has a lot of interesting stuff in it because of its separation. And then like Rainier and Central District and parts of what's it called? Madrona, I guess, and then like up to like the Japanese Gardens towards the south of Seattle's limits. That is essentially a neighborhood with a rich part, and then that rich part is shared with the U district. But it's like 4-ish neighborhoods, and I don't count Magnolia as a neighborhood. I count Magnolia as a park that a bunch of rich people ruined, and I will never count that as having a flavor of its own because it doesn't. It's just entitled rich white people that act like you shouldn't be there. And the East Side sucks. Like, I live on the East Side and I think it's livable, but it really does feel like human purgatory over here. Like, it's just, it's a bunch of people who, whether they made money before or after they got here, have sunk into like their own house and don't want anybody to come near it. I don't think it's a neighborhood. Like, we have a town here in Kirkland, and it's exactly like 2 blocks by 2 blocks wide, and that's it. And there's a lot of people out here, so the fact that there's so little town, I think, is indicative of how people treat each other here. They don't want to see you, and I don't have any time for that shit. Like, what's the point of living in a community if you're going to ignore that community? It's why when I see people also doing some amount of activism here, my initial thought is, oh, there is another person here, not there's a group, because it doesn't feel like there could be a group of people. There's just like maybe another person who's kind of like me, and that's it. But who knows? Like, that's all just my perception, but the idea of Seattle having a whole bunch of diverse neighborhoods, now that I've lived in honestly most of them, is bullshit. Like, it's very much a couple of neighborhoods, and like the U district is unique only because it is accepting of people who are non-white in a way that only like the Central District really is. But I don't know. It is frustrating, and those problems are the same as most cities. But New York, while they're really segmented, their neighborhoods are so like voluminous and full that you don't feel that way when you're there. You feel like there is a like wave of people, and they all have slightly different things they're doing, but you can just sort of like get lost in it. And as long as you're not being an idiot, that's great. Like, it feels pleasant to be in like a hive of people like that.
Yeah, I think that's what I liked most about being there too, is because initially, of course, the first day that I visited New York, it's very overwhelming if you're like an anxious person, but
yeah,
the next couple of days I really liked it because so much of being anxious is just being inside your own head and like hyper focusing on everything you've got going on. But when you realize that there's like a billion people around you and literally no one cares what you're doing, it's very freeing. And definitely I could never have that sense like out here, because there's like less than 10,000 people or something. Like, I mean, there's more than that, but it's too insular. But I really like the freedom of just being surrounded by so many people doing their own thing. That's really nice.
And just from a selfish point of view, I also like being in Kirkland and doing any kind of street art is like, okay, I have to take like 2 days to plan where I'm going to put this fucking sticker because you can see what I'm doing from like half of the town. So
Mm-hmm.
like I'm having to find ways to make things the fastest possible thing I can do with the least bodily motion. And it's just like, this isn't like it is artistic to find these things that will still show people sort of an opinion so that you can have some kind of effect. But the the way that a larger city is, like when I was living in Capitol Hill or downtown or Georgetown for that matter, like just across the street from Georgetown, the way of doing street art was just like, that's a good spot and that says what I want it to say, and then you go put it there and
Yeah.
nobody gives a shit because that's just like, unless you're actually defacing something, nobody cares about that. Like that's just adding to the whole like picture of what they're looking at. But when you're in these like smaller towns, everybody gets so possessive of like, there's so little here, obviously it's all very important to me, which it also isn't, but you start to get that kind of brain,
Yeah.
which is honestly why I think there's so many people on the east side that are so opposed to mass transit getting here in a real way, because they don't want people to come integrate with what they're doing, which is both selfish and stupid. Like, I don't know how you could live wanting that.
Yeah, so much. I mean, like what you said earlier about Kirkland, I totally agree with. It feels very um, like toy town or like display town. Like everything
Yeah.
is for uh very touristy, but not just that. It's just very like on. It's like put on. I don't know what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say, but yeah.
I yeah, I get what you mean though. Like the sort of the facade of having something that's more built up is more important to people than having any
Right.
sort of culture.
But
That's why
there's no
fucking
like community center there. There's nothing.
yeah, there's a library that I see like two people in at a time. I'm
Mhm.
sure it's popular for some people, but it's empty. Like that's the nicest and the most like accessible building in this entire town, and people are just kind of like, eh. And like having art galleries get like closed down and them being replaced with workout places is perfect for what this town is, of just like nobody cares about like the art walks we have here are sad. Like we went to one, didn't we, where it was just
Yeah.
like it was us and like we could see like maybe four other people doing it, and every place we stopped was like, oh, somebody stopped. Like it's such a like a downer for like the art community to be like that.
Mhm.
I mean, it's nice to meet people and have like more than enough time to like talk to them about their work and stuff, but at the same time, it's just like I don't know why you're here is sort of the thing I want to ask them, when you could be in any other, you could be in Pioneer Square and talk to like 1,000 people today, or
Yeah.
you could be here and talk to us and that guy over there, and that's it. Uh, I don't know. People like the wine walk, but of course they do. The East Side has no culture, I guess is more what I'm saying. The bits of culture you can pull out are, hey, I work out once a week. Like that's the culture of the East Side. Uh, they all
Yeah.
have enough money to not need culture, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I downtown Kirkland is kind of like a weird, ever rotating cast of niche, like gimmicky shops. Like I remember, I don't know, there was like a baby toy store or like a child's toy store on that
Uh-huh.
one main drag, and then like a gelato place, and then a Starbucks. Um, and then like a gallery that got replaced by your
Yeah.
workout place. kind of really sad. But
also, so they had a candy shop, that interior decorator place we went to, and which is like one of the only places that had any personality. And then what was the other thing? It wasn't a workout place. It was like another type of shop. All of those are empty as of like last week.
oh wow.
And so now that section of like slightly interesting stuff in Kirkland is literally like an entire block of empty buildings. Like there's nothing there. And like now that we're getting into Flavor Town of the pandemic, it's really becoming apparent like, oh yeah, these places can't exist. Like these places that had passion behind them but not like pure economy holding them up, they're not going to be here anymore, because why would they be? The other places that have closed down now are like the like individually owned hair place and like the one consignment shop and stuff. Like it's all places that are bespoke, all places that are like actually interesting. By the end of this pandemic, it's probably going to be like 5 Starbucks in this town, and then like places to work out while you drink it, and that's it. The bubble tea places survived though, so that's good at least.
That is good. Our bubble tea place did not meet such nice ends. It just, I don't even know how a bubble tea place dies here. It like the way it's like within walking distance of the college campus. It's right next to the main drag. It's not even like walking distance of campus. It's like so close that it might as well be on campus. I have no idea how people let that shop die, and I am so upset about it.
It's that extreme property worth in Moscow.
Oh yeah. I wonder even what. It can't be a Starbucks. Starbucks won't take that spot because there's already a Starbucks on campus. I don't know. We'll see. Pretty sad though.
Yeah, it fucking sucks.
Now I have to DoorDash my boba from the other town, which until recently was not even an option.
Man, I gotta get back health in this community, because the dating scene doesn't exist, and if I'm ever gonna DoorDash my boba again, it's gonna require being able to see people in person. That's my sex joke for the episode.
It was good. I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
With the golf clap. Thank you. It was a nice joke. Well, where can people find us online if they want to, I don't know, send us nude pictures or whatever?
They can send their nudes to our Instagram, which is at Vegeta429.
Nope.
No, that's not right. What did I say? 42069. 42069.
Yeah.
Vegeta42069. Or our email, which is it's this week's podcast at gmail.com. No spaces or dots or anything.
Yeah, all one word. It's this week's podcast at gmail.com. You can break up the monotony of people telling us like how to get more followers or whatever. Thanks. Yeah, we'll get right on it, YouTube. And with that, unless you have another topic you'd like to get to, I don't think you do, but
no.
Excellent.
I don't.
I gotta struggle through the rest of Jesse's podcast juice, so let's do that live on air.
Ooh. Chug, 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 chug. Wait, it's not chugging if you're slurping. Oh, slurping.
Slurp.
Slurp. Slurp. Slurp. Slurp.
Oh, yeah.
That looked Good.
Now we podcasted. How about some music for the exit?
Whoa.
Thanks for coming to our podcast.
Thanks
The
for
Jabbers.
listening. Be gone, thoughts.